I taught biology here for 38 years until I retired in 1997 as an assistant head teacher. At the time, I was the second longest serving teacher in the history of King James's School. I must confess it seems quite a long time to me, but in the long history of the school, it really was no time at all. King James's School has a long and fascinating story to tell over more than 4 centuries. But the story doesn't start here, but about a mile away at the impressive setting of Woodsum Hall. Today, Woodsum Hall is a noted local golf club, but in the middle of the 16th century, which is where our story starts, it was the home of Arthur and Beatrix Kay. The present east and southeast front is, in fact, the very same building, and it has changed very little in the intervening years. Here, in 1530, was born Arthur's son and heir John. John was still just a child when Henry VIII broke with Rome and declared himself head of the Church of England, and a few years later, in 1545, an act was passed giving the king power to close the chantries. Realizing that they had to act quickly, as the chantry school in St. Helen's Gate was under threat, young John Kay, now 17 years of age, joined with his father Arthur in the task of pulling down the chantry stone by stone and rebuilding it as a schoolhouse on the site of the present school. They also procured a teacher for the school, a Mr. Smythe, and under him the school began a new life as a grammar school. When James I came to the throne in 1603, certain gentlemen in the village decided, as a matter of urgency, to petition the new king that the school should become a royal school with provision for its future endowment. And so it was that Thomas Beaumont set off on horseback from his home in Kirkheaton on his 5-day journey through rude, uncivil and dangerous lands to carry out his important mission to Hampton Court. Beaumont did his task well. He knew all the right people and which strings to pull. The efforts of John Kay and his father here at Woodsum Hall 60 years earlier had not been in vain. Beaumont had managed a hole-in-one. The letters patent, now known as the Charter, was signed and sealed by the King on the 24th of November 1608 at a cost of over £44, equivalent to several thousands of pounds in today's money. The Great Seal alone cost over £8. Below the illumination, a figure of James I bearing the Auburn sceptre, framed by his initial letter, the Charter carries the colourful coats of arms of the first 6 governors of the school. The petitioners Robert Kay of Woodsum, William Ramsden of Longley, George Crossland, vicar of the parish of Almonbury, Nicholas Fenney of Fenney, Richard Appleyard of Over Longley, and Robert Nettleton of Almonbury. By 1700, the school had received its statutes, which defined the responsibilities of the master and the conduct of the pupils.
The schoolmaster shall suppress all disorders in the school, and shall not at any time suffer any gaming, joining, clubbing, or sending for ale, wine, or other strong liquors into the school at school times, unless when the governors visit the said school, or when the boys break up the school at Christmas.
In 1706, the young Thomas Tatham, son of the newly appointed Vicar of Almonbury, decided to make his own mark on the magnificent oak desk of the master in the schoolroom. There he boldly carved his name, even adding the date so that his deed should not be overlooked by history. The Reverend Alfred Easter became master in 1848, and it was he who supervised the building of a new schoolroom, now known as the ODH, to replace the single-story building erected in the late 1750s by Samuel Brooke. The entrance was from the yard outside. The stained glass window at the side of the fireplace was put in at Easter's personal expense. A tablet to his honour is mounted on the wall of the ODH to this day. Above the schoolroom was a new dormitory for the boarders, later known as Dorm 4. A controversial figure, the Reverend Francis Marshall, became master in 1878. He was a firm disciplinarian and a successful teacher and writer with dozens of texts and books to his credit. By the 1870s, his policy of attracting boarders was working so well that the voracious appetites of the young boarders were placing the domestic catering facilities under some strain, and the eminent Halifax architect of the day, William Swindon Barber, was commissioned to design a new kitchen area with accommodation for servants above. At the same time, a new classroom was built, with a dormitory above, later known as Dorm 1. But this was only phase 1 of the expansion plans. 3 years later, the same architect was responsible for a magnificent new schoolroom known as the Big, later to become the library, still without a doubt the most elegant room in the school. A further small classroom was also built at this time, known not surprisingly as the Small, and there was also a further large dormitory which was later divided to become Dorm 2 and Dorm 3. The Fenny Quad came into being as a result of these additions, and a memorial stone over the porch doorway was laid by Mrs. John Arthur Brooke of Fenny Hall in recognition of the ongoing financial and moral support the school received from the Brooke family. Thanks to Marshall's efforts, the school was at last doing well. But disaster lay around the corner, and ironically, it was to some extent Marshall who caused it. The school was already under new pressure because of the creation of competing schools elsewhere in the town. But to make matters worse, Marshall himself became deeply unpopular in some circles because of what became known as the rugby rumpus. Marshall had an excessive passion for rugby and became increasingly and obsessively opposed to the creeping professionalism which he felt was in danger of corrupting his precious game. He addressed meetings on the topic all over the country, fanning the flames of the controversy. A cartoonist caught the mood of the time perfectly. There was strong resentment of his attitude amongst many people in and around Huddersfield, and by 1895 Marshall's campaign failed ingloriously when Professional Rugby League was founded at the George Hotel in Huddersfield. A saddened Francis Marshall departed in 1896 to take up a living in Norfolk. When his successor Leonard Griffiths arrived later that year, the school was down to 11 pupils and was at crisis point. He enjoyed some initial success and managed to boost numbers to 37 in his first 18 months. One was Felix Aylmer Jones, who became the eminent actor Felix Aylmer, shown here with Deborah Kerr, John Mills, and a young Haley Mills.
What did you do, Miss Madrigal? Miss Madrigal, why don't you sit down? I was saying, do you think grief tastes more sharply than pleasure on the palate? Miss Madrigal.
I'm sorry. I don't seem to have the give and take of clever conversation.
Well, at least age does give tone to certain things. Violins, old wine, old friends to drink it with. As Maitland, we'll have the wine.
None for me, thank you. Alcohol in the middle of the day is exciting when you're 30, but disastrous at 70.
But it can make you feel 30 again. Well, oh. Turn back the clock, Maitland. The judge will have some.
Judge,
Yes,
you're trying a murder case on Monday, aren't you?
I am.
Well, love to see you on the bench again after all these years.
You should. Time decorates a judge.
Well, what Maitland and I want to know...
And Miss Madrigal, conversation should include everybody.
But it's Maitland and I who collect the great crime series. The trial. How will it begin?
When I enter court,
How will you enter?
slowly, soberly, with deliberate gravity, robed in scarlet, terrifying.
She broke the glass.
But the success was not to last, and without the financial support of the Brooke family, the school would undoubtedly have had to close down for good when Griffiths, a man with limited ability and vision, departed after only 3 years at the helm. Robert Simpson Crump took over a few days after Christmas 1901. It was bitterly cold, the snow lay deep in St. Helens Gate, and Crump's new home had succumbed to broken pipes and peeling walls. Crump, a Yorkshireman, commented ironically, "I knew I was back home." Like his predecessor, Crump made an excellent start. He made some excellent appointments and within 8 years had boosted pupil numbers from 24 to 100. His efforts were noted with satisfaction in the Sadler Report of 1905, which recommended that the school should be developed into a first-class secondary school for boys of Huddersfield. Things looked good for Crump and for the school, but disaster awaited yet again. The Sadler Report was roundly criticised by those with vested interests elsewhere, and Crump, a sensitive man, took it all very much to heart. A lover of nature and of solitude, he left the school in 1912 to take up fruit farming in British Columbia, later returning to run a fruit farm in Kent. And so the scene was set in 1913 for the arrival of the most famous gaffer of them all, the 30-year-old Manchester University graduate Taylor Dyson. When he arrived, there were just 56 boys on the register. There would be over 250 when he retired 32 years later. Taylor Dyson was the last master to live with his wife Poppy and their 2 children in the schoolhouse. Taylor Dyson recruited some excellent new staff, and by 1920 the school had a teaching complement of 11 and a register of some 200 pupils. Play was as important as work for Taylor Dyson, and in 1921 he instituted the series of Gilbert and Sullivan productions that were to become such a feature of school life for the following 30 years.
Every passion ranging and to your humours changing, I tune my song, I tune my song.
Taylor Dyson's team of 1932 included many names that will still be remembered by Old Armamburians today. Leonard Ashe, Edward Aykroyd, Harry Gledhill, Walter Haig, Leonard Hadlow, Charles Eves, Johnny Hopton, Herbert Titch Blackburn, John Baldwin, Taylor Dyson himself, Robert Byrne, Hubert Hurst, and Reg Addy, also known as Dick. In 1935, his team was further strengthened by the arrival of Fred Hudson, FRGS, a superb geographer and teacher. Later, he would succeed Leonard Ashe as second master, and he took a deep interest in every aspect of school life. Many used to joke that his FRGS really stood for Fred Runs the Grammar School. The continuing growth of the school meant that new extensions were again becoming necessary, and in 1938 handsome new physics and chemistry laboratories were built, with further new classrooms, N1, N2 and N3, together with a new art room and store, a woodwork room, a new school entrance, and a purpose-designed gymnasium and school hall in which Walter. The school continued to turn out pupils who would make their marks in the world around them. One of Taylor Dyson's pupils of the 1940s was Geoffrey Nielsen Taylor, who, as a fine athlete while at school, found himself a few years later leading the attack at Huddersfield Town Football Club, moving later to Fulham and Brentford. While studying for his degree in London, he then became involved in music and in due course achieved international fame in the world of opera.
I lift my glass to soldiers gay and bold. Vanilla, thank you, with carriage flaming, thrill with joy when they combat behold. See the arena thronged with crowds of people, the seats are filled above below. Lampers ring out from every steeple, all over
Another product of the Taylor Dyson era was Derek Ibbotson, who entered the school in 1943 and dominated cross-country running throughout his school career. In 1957, the whole school would share Ibbotson's pride in setting a new world record for the mile of 3 minutes 57.2 seconds at the White City Stadium.
Side and the world 1500-metre record holder, the Czech Stanislav Jungwirth, against Derek Ibbotson. And straight into the lead goes Michael Blagrove, 77, the Ealing Harrier, and with him goes the Czech, 74, bumping and boring on that first corner there. Ibbotson was a bit caught, but he's all right. He's moved now into third place, and the order down the back straight, Blagrove, Jungwirth and Ibbotson, with the Olympic champion from Ireland, Ronnie Delaney, in fourth place. The Ealing Harrier cutting out a really throbbing pace for this first lap, going very fast indeed, and this of course is what the Czech likes. Jungwirth, the world 1500-metre record holder, likes a fast pace, and he's certainly getting it from Michael Blagrove. There, Ibbotson, 71, in third place, going along very well. A really cracking pace this first lap, and we'll see as they come past the lap marker the time for this first lap. Blagrove, Jungwirth, Ibbotson and Delaney. Coming up now to the marker, and the time is really fast. 55.3 seconds, with the Czech there in second place and Ibbotson galloping along in third place with the Irishman with that characteristic pecking style of his in fourth place. Jungwirth with his elbows out wide in second place, and the Yorkshireman rollicking along there in third place. Blagrove showing no sign of slackening, just glancing over his shoulder to see where the check was. And it's Blagrove, Michael Blagrove of Ealing, Stanislav Jungwirth, Czechoslovakia, Derek Ibbotson, Great Britain, and Ronnie Delaney of Ireland in fourth place. Lewandowski of Poland now moves up to fifth, and Alan Gordon of Great Britain and Ken Wood of Great Britain trailing at the back. Coming up now to the halfway mark in this classic 1 mile. Beautiful evening, still conditions, fast track, no wind. Coming up now to the halfway mark, and Mike Blagrove still in the lead. The time, 1 minute 55.8. This is a tremendous pace and it must crack soon. The Czech grimacing there in second place, Ibbotson in third and Delaney fourth. The Pole, Lewandowski, now moving up on Delaney, but out ahead it's Blagrove and he must crack soon. He can't possibly last this pace. Yes, the Czech now moving up. Yes, the Czech comes up to take over the lead. Ibbotson reading the race there from second place, covering any break. And a magnificent bit of pacemaking by Michael Blagrove. And now the big four out ahead. Jungwirth, Ibbotson, Lewandowski, and the Olympic champion Ronnie Delaney in fourth place. Delaney with his devastating finish, a very dangerous contender. And they're coming up now to the bell. The pace is slackened, but it's still pretty fast. The time at the bell, 3 minutes exactly. The crowd now think they're going to see a 4-minute mile, and surely they will. The tension's getting unbearable, and the Yorkshireman now in second place with the world record holder Jungwirth out ahead. Delaney back in fourth place, and the Czech still going strongly. But there goes Ibbotson. This is incredible. He's striking from 300 yards. What a display of courage and guts by there, and the time's really fast. 3 minutes, 54, 55, 56, 57. He's done it. A new world record. And the next three are also inside 4 minutes. Delaney, Jungwirth, and Ken Wood of Great Britain. Magnificent running. A new English native, British national, British all-comers, European, Empire and World's record. It's been confirmed. 3 minutes, 57.2, and Landy's world record goes into the discard and is now back with Britain.
One of Ibbotson's fellow pupils was Ron Lancaster, whose interest in chemistry was aroused by Doc Calloway. Later appointed chaplain, he set up the Kimbolton Fireworks Company and became known as the Master Blaster Pastor. Children's writer and former Huddersfield Examiner reporter Michael Hardcastle attended King James's from 1944. He has written around 150 books, mainly on sporting themes, and received an MBE for his services to children's literature. The Second World War meant that gas masks and air raid shelters became an unwelcome part of school life. But the war was to have a much bigger personal impact on Taylor Dyson, who was to suffer a shattering blow when his son Marcus returned from infantry service in India and Burma to die in 1946 in a military hospital. Edward Aykroyd's memorial book in the present library records his name, along with 35 other Old Armamburians who died in the conflict. Taylor Dyson retired in 1945 and died in Christchurch in 1957. In 1946 there were proposals that the school should become a secondary modern school, which brought a chill to every Old Armamburian's heart. Battle commenced, the troops being led by the formidable Gerald Dobson, who had been a boarder at the school in the early days of Taylor Dyson's headmastership.
Well, this is a very special room in the history of the Dobson family. It's presently the bursar's office, and it sits immediately over the present headmaster's study, which in days gone by was Taylor Dyson's private sitting room. And this room was in fact my father's bedsit room. It came about because he was sent to Almonbury at the age of 8 after he was orphaned. He was sent here by his legal guardians into the care of Taylor Dyson and Mrs. Taylor Dyson, and he spent all his school days at the school, never returning home, for he had no home to go to. And indeed, at the age of 11 or 12, he spent nights alone in the school during school holidays, a daunting experience for a boy of 11 or 12. And at the end of his formal schooling, because he had no home to go to, and he got his job at the bank in Huddersfield, Taylor Dyson and Mrs. Dyson gave him the use of this room as a bedsit to which he could return after his day's work. And so it is a very, very special room in our family, and the memories that my father had of this room were very, very mixed indeed, because his childhood here was difficult to say the least. And I remember him bringing me here just after I started at the school to show me this room, which I think was a little bit smaller in his day. I think there probably have been some alterations to it. But there it is, a special room, and of course he has a special place in the school history for a number of reasons, and the school has a special place in his heart as well. And so it was appropriate that when he returned from his war service in 1946, he got involved in the threat to the status of the school, a threat which was mounted by Huddersfield Corporation. He threw himself wholeheartedly into this role. The Old Almonburian Society had reformed itself in 1946, and this was necessary partly because of the threat, but also the need for the Old Almonburians themselves to meet again and try and bring the society back to the strength it enjoyed before the war. My father became secretary of a subcommittee which was set up specifically to counter the threat to the school's status, and in that role he played a very, very important part indeed. And so as a result of this visit to London and the presentation of the case against the corporation, and the fact that the arguments have been so carefully prepared, my father was able to show that the argument about the school's expansion to cater for future needs was not soundly based, and of course future events have proved that to be so as the school's expanded on this present site. And so, much to the delight of the society, and I think to many of the population of Huddersfield, the status of the school was saved and assured for the future, so that Almonbury Grammar School would continue in its present status and on the site where it will be allowed to grow and cater for the future needs of Huddersfield and the area.
John Baldwin and Horace Moore consolidated the successes of the Taylor Dyson years. One of the pupils of that time would achieve musical fame. Old Almonburian John Watson found himself at the top of the UK hit parade when in 1961 the Temperance 7 recording of You're Driving Me Crazy with John on banjo hit the jackpot. It was closely followed by Pasadena, and for some years the band was a familiar part of the light entertainment scene. contemporary of John Watson was Old Armemburian Stephen Card, who in due course became a leading silk. His high-profile cases included defending the assistant boatswain of the Herald of Free Enterprise, which capsized in Zeebrugge Harbour in 1987, and defending Ian Huntley in the Surham murder trial of 2003. A new arrival in Horace More's time was history teacher Francis Barham. Always very supportive of the Old Armemburian Society, Francis sadly died in 2008, the year of the anniversary for which he had looked forward for so long. Then in 1951 arrived the Harry Taylor years.
I was 7 years old in 1951 when my father was successful in obtaining the post as head of King James's. We moved from Doncaster, where he'd been senior history master, and I well remember the removal van coming to pick up our furniture. We followed on the train, we had no car at the time, and I nursed my goldfish in a glass jar. The furniture was deposited at 13 and 15 Westgate, behind the Conservative Club in Armonbury. 2 cottages knocked into one, and we paid our rent to the council. Strangely, later we discovered, or it was discovered, that the cottages belonged to the King James's School Trust. My father had been successful in interview and put in his expenses. The council, in their wisdom, removed the half pint of beer he'd put down as he had with his lunch on the interview day. Later, he was to have a tankard in the Woolpack, which took a pint and a quarter.
Harry Taylor's first speech day in 1952 was addressed by distinguished royal physician and Old Armemburian Sir Harold Himsworth. A keen cricketer, Harry was delighted when the Countess of Scarborough opened the new cricket pavilion in 1958 to mark the school's 350th anniversary.
When my father came here, this was to be a jumping-off place. He was a career-minded man, and he was looking for bigger schools. But as my brother explains in the anniversary booklet, he found this place so much to his liking that he decided to stay. He was walking up the hill to the Woolpack, or perhaps to the church, and he looked back at the school and the Farnley Valley and decided this was where he wanted to make his mark. And he made his mark in the village as well, as Vice President of Armonbury Cricket Club, Armonbury Wesleyans Cricket Club, and eventually of the Old Armemburians Cricket Club. As a reader in the church, along with 3 other Armemburians, Reg and Trevor Carter and Raymond Hall. As Vice President of the British Legion, a trustee of the Nettleton Charity, he would go around distributing 7 shillings and 6pence to needy pensioners.
A historian, he updated the old school Almonbury Grammar School monogram and received royal assent to restore the school's historic name, King James's Grammar School. The chance rediscovery of the charter in 1952 was an occasion of drama and excitement. A small party of pupils from the Surveying Society, led by Fred Hudson, went to an exhibition of historical documents in the library of the Yorkshire Historical Society in Leeds. One of their number was Gerald Dobson's son, Alan.
Yes, I remember clearly the discovery of the school charter. I remember going as a member of the Surveying Society run by Fred Hudson to an exhibition in Leeds. Strangely, just before we went to the exhibition, some days before, I'd picked up a clue that the school charter was there. I must have read it somewhere, or somebody must have said something to me. So when we got to the exhibition, I made my way as quickly as possible to try and find the school charter. I didn't realise the significance of the school charter and the fact that it had been missing for so long. So when I found it, it was a matter of some interest to me, nothing special. And I walked a little further around the exhibition and said to Mr. Hudson when I found him, "Have you seen the charter yet, sir?" And Fred was fairly dismissive and said, no, all in due course, I'm looking at something here. And I said, oh, well, it's rather nice, I think. And eventually he found his way round with me and said, good heavens. And I can remember the expression of sheer bewilderment on his face. He was absolutely astonished. To me, it was nothing special at all. It was the school charter. But Fred, of course, knew what a precious document this was and how keen in the past the society and the school had been to rediscover it. And there it was in all its glory. Fred was soon surrounded by the other members of the party. There were several of us there at that time, and I think that the rest of the evening was spent around the school charter, and nothing much else was looked at the exhibition.
Attending the school in the early years of the Harry Taylor era was Gordon Kay, who would in due course have much fun on BBC television with the ladies. 85 episodes of 'Allo 'Allo were broadcast on BBC One between 1982 and 1992, and the programme is still a favourite repeat today.
You are possibly wondering why I am packing a few things into this little case. I will explain. Once again, I am leaving. I have decided that life around here is getting too dangerous for me. Well, for a start, you will have seen the big hole outside in the village square. Would you believe that that crater was caused by exploding Christmas puddings? Captain Bertarelli, the greasy eye-tie, had made these puddings the centerpiece for an abortive wedding breakfast. And I was forced to hurl them from my cafe when he decided to serve them flambé. Now, what is worse, I have stolen 4 bars of gold belonging to General von Klinkerhoffen. And when he finds out about that, he will have me shot. To avoid suspicion, I am only taking the barest necessities. Some underwear, a towel, a razor, a toothbrush.
René!
And my emergency rations.
I'm ready to go as soon as you wish. Oh. I've bought just a few small things for the journey.
Put them in the case. We will be leaving in 5 minutes.
René? Where is the gold? You promised you would take the gold so we could live our life of love in Switzerland.
Well, it is better that you do not know the whereabouts of the gold, Yvette. Now, be a good girl. Take this lot down to the kitchen for me, huh?
René? Are you hiding it on your person?
No.
No. I do not believe you.
Oh,
Really?
What are you doing, letting that servant girl fondle you?
You stupid woman. She was looking for the key to the wine cellar.
I thought the key was always kept down below.
She has not yet searched that far.
Here it is.
Brian Hopkinson, who joined the school in 1967, left King James's to enter the diplomatic service. In due course, he became British ambassador to Bosnia at a time of turbulence in the Balkans. Academically, the school went from strength to strength. The 1967 team included a young Dave Bush, who would in due course become a noted deputy head and has remained a very close friend. And an equally young Jack Taylor, who by this time was in his 18th year at the school. The school was to scale new heights during Harry Taylor's 22 years as headmaster. But there was a new cloud on the horizon. Huddersfield Corporation's decision in the 1960s to introduce comprehensive education. Harry Taylor's final speech day in October 1972 at the Town Hall was an occasion of uncertainty and sadness.
This is no time or place to pursue the argument that has gone on for so long. Continuation of the present unhappy situation means slow death to the school and all that it stands for. Now is a time for decision, and that as speedily as possible. For those concerned with that decision, I say this. Here we have a school which throughout its history has endeavoured to fulfil the charter precept of the inculcation of good learning and virtue, or, as we might express it today, the fostering of high standards, a sense of value, and the spirit of community. This is a school whose academic record over the past 3 years ranks high with that of the finest schools in the land. This is a school whose members are not and never have been mere academic grubs, but engage in enjoyment and success in the widest interests and activities. They look to the world outside and see its problems and are prepared to do something about them. They are able to work from an atmosphere of tradition and fellowship in a community which gives strength to their endeavours. All this could be lost.
Chairman of the Old Armamburian Society around that time was Leslie Holroyd, whose daughter, Nicky Green, has worked in the office at King James's School for many years.
Yes, it was a time of uncertainty. Gerald Dobson again was involved with all these problems. I knew Gerald Dobson. He used to be the chief cashier of the bank at the National Provincial Bank down King Street, and eventually I got a job there from college down King Street, which it became the National Westminster Bank. But I used to hear lots of tales about Gerald when he was working there. And then I got involved with Gerald again when my late father was the chairman of the Old Armamburian Society, and he would contact my father, ring him up and discuss all the problems that was going on, and also a lot of correspondence went backwards and forwards with my father. So I used to hear a lot about Gerald Dobson. And then, of course, when he found out that in later on, he found out that I actually worked in the office at King James's School, and he was thrilled to bits about this. And he often used to ring me here at school with various asking for various information.
This was a time of great uncertainty, and I know my father was quite upset that the thought of his grammar school would disappear. But he wasn't a head in the sand man, and he felt here was a new challenge for the school. It was inevitable that there were changes. There have been changes in the past, there would be changes in the future. And he felt it was time for him to step down and for somebody else to take the school on to the new horizons.
This ancient school, which has experienced and absorbed so many changes, has now the opportunity to bring to the new system the light of experience, the values of tradition, and the example of sound academic standards.
After much debate, a decision was made in 1974 that King James's should become a sixth form college. It also became co-educational, and, to the evident approval of the boys, and even some of the staff, I must admit, the first girls were admitted into the sixth form. Alan Conley took over as headmaster in 1974, and after 2 years as a sixth form college, the school took on a new role as a 13 to 18 mixed comprehensive. Conley managed this difficult period with skill, and when he retired in 1985, he left a popular and successful school. Clive Watkins and Martin Shevell continued the good work up to 1992. In 1989, young cricketer Ryan Sidebottom, son of the legendary Arnie Sidebottom, joined King James's. He made his debut with Yorkshire in 1997 and has established himself as a dependable member of the England Test team.
England's morning huddle suggested they were leaving nothing to chance. Always the prospect that the Kiwis' tail could provide something of a sting. And New Zealand survived the first 25 minutes without alarm, looking to Jacob Oram to get the big score that would give England the jitters. But the problems were at the other end. Gareth Hopkins snicked one from Ryan Sidebottom. Then captain Daniel Vittori followed him back to the pavilion. All Oram could do was watch as Kyle Mills and Ian O'Brien came and went to give Sidebottom his 6th wicket of the innings. England's next test is against South Africa in just over a month. Collecting winning souvenirs might not be so easy then.
In 1990, the school became a co-educational comprehensive for the age group 11 to 16. This was the school's last sixth form, posing on the lawn in front of the library in 1989. During the 1990s, the school became involved in one of the most curious episodes in its long and occasional turbulent history. We're now standing on the school cricket ground up at Arkenley Lane, and you can probably see the cricket pavilion in the background. For a long period of my life, cricket has been very important to me, and I've played cricket with the Old Armamburians Cricket Club since its inception by Graham Cliff in 1976. For a long time, relationships between the cricket club and the school were harmonious, but there was a time when relationships seemed to become strained, and we were rather stumped as to an explanation for this situation.
The difficulties which arose between the Old Armamburians Cricket Club and the school in the early 1990s were largely as a result of pressure on the school's budget. They were looking to save money, and there were certainly members of the governing body who probably thought that maintaining a cricket field and a pavilion could no longer be justified. That was a cause of considerable dismay to members of the cricket club and also to the wider membership of the society. It was discovered at about this time that the cricket field was in fact one of the assets owned by the King James's School Foundation, a trust fund that had been set up in the 17th century. Ultimately, when enquiries were made, it transpired that the fund owned a number of properties in the Almonbury area, particularly the building that we all know as Almonbury Conservative Club. It was originally Wormel Hall, built in the 17th century. It proved to be only one of many assets in the King James's School Foundation Trust. The school itself, the older part of the school, is actually owned by the trust fund. But in addition to that, there are properties in Wormelt Street in Almonbury, cottages in Westgate in Almonbury, as well as property at Swallow Lane in Golka. There are also pieces of land in Arkenley Lane and Sharp Lane, all forming part of what is now a fairly wealthy trust. It soon became apparent, as we made more inquiries, that the financial position of the trust was a little uncertain, and it transpired that Kirklees Council, at that time the trustee of the trust, had not filed accounts for a period of 7 years. The Charity Commission itself was concerned about that and sought to have Kirklees Council put it right. It was a long and difficult process. The Old Armamburians Society was determined to continue with its inquiries to find out just how much money that should have been paid into the trust had not in fact been paid in, what in fact the losses were. And to that end, the society was very fortunate to have the services of a local solicitor, an Old Armamburian, and indeed a former member of the Old Armamburians Cricket Club, called Nigel Priestley. As a result of Nigel's good work and also the efforts of a number of other Old Armamburians, and following on from various meetings, including one with the Charity Commissioners in Liverpool, Kirklees Council was ultimately removed as the trustee, and in September of 2001 was replaced by 8 new individual trustees. I am one of them. In fact, I am the chairman of the trust fund at the present time. And once we had been put in place, it began to be a little bit easier to establish the financial history, and it soon became apparent that many thousands of pounds that should have been in the trust fund had not been accounted for. As a result of that, we invited Kirklees Council to speak with us, but they were somewhat obstinate, refused to do that, and eventually we had to sue Kirklees Council in the High Court in Manchester, and that quickly brought them to heel. A mediation was set up at the George Hotel in Huddersfield, and after 15 hours of mediation, a settlement was agreed upon, which meant that the trust fund was recompensed to the tune of several £100,000. The exact figure has always been the subject of a confidentiality agreement, but in fact the figure appeared in the Huddersfield Examiner within a few days of the mediation being completed. What that settlement means is that the trust fund is now probably worth, in terms of investments, bonds and property, something in the region of £2 million, and King James's School is now very fortunate in being able to benefit from that trust fund to the extent of, say, £50,000 or £60,000 every year.
The present head teacher, Robert Lamb, took up his appointment in 2003. An early success was the achievement of Specialist Science College status the following year.
When I arrived at the school, David Bradford, who was one of the teachers at the time and still works at the school, was working on a bid for specialist status in science. This was quite crucial actually for the future of the school, but the ironic thing about that was that I'd already been involved in the writing of a successful bid at my previous school, also for a special science college status. The reason why it was crucial that we achieved that is because over the years we have suffered as a school from lack of funding. We're one of the worst funded schools in Kirklees in reality. So we needed the money desperately to update our facilities, which were looking a bit tatty, and as you walked around the school it wasn't really a nice environment anywhere you went. So when we gained Specialist Science College status, the £150,000 we got initially and the £100,000 that we get every year has helped us to make the school wonderful like it looks now. And a lot of thanks need to go out for that. I mean, obviously a lot of thanks go to the Old Ormond Viewing Society, which donated £5,000 initially on that. Thanks again must go to the King James's School Foundation, who contributed £25,000. But also thanks need to go to the numerous old members of the Old Ormond Viewing Society who individually contributed small amounts that helped us to raise the £50,000 sponsorship that we needed. Great achievement, and I think that helped to contribute to where King James is now, where we're on the high really with the best GCSE results in the history of the school, and the future looks extremely bright.
A fireworks display organised by Ron Lancaster's Kimbolden Fireworks was a fitting and spectacular prelude to the 400th anniversary dinner in the Gull Farm Stadium on the 22nd of November 2008.
I want to watch the slides today.
Yeah, slides.
Oh, those are nice and they were colour.
Appropriately, 400 Old Armamburians attended this magnificent occasion.
Sitting there with a glass of red in one hand and a book in the other, as you do at 70, and the telephone rang, and this guy said, "This is Richard Taylor." And your heart sinks, doesn't it? Because you know very well that you're going to have a lousy meal because you've got to speak after it. What I want you to do, he said, is crack a few jokes for a few minutes and then speak about the school. I think he's got the wrong K. I'm Doug K. There's Gordon K. There's Danny K. It's Peter K. He's got the wrong one.
I've spoken at many dinners, but I've never spoken to an audience of this size, or to an audience with which I've felt such an emotional bond. It's a real roller coaster ride for me tonight, and has been for the last few days. There are people in this room that I have a very deep love and respect for, many, many of them. But as you will understand, I also have a very personal, emotional link with tonight. My father spoke at the 1958 dinner in the town hall. And if I paraphrase a little sentence from Gerald Hinchlif's wonderful book, those who don't see his spirit here are simply not looking. I feel him on my shoulder. He's saying, "For God's sake, lad, don't make a mess of it." Francis and Reg Addy used to take the school trips to France. Many of you will have been on those wonderful occasions. And on a particular trip to Paris, they did the usual tourist thing of the Louvre, Sacré-Cœur, the Eiffel Tower and so on, and rounded off the trip with a theatre visit. Unusually for them, because they were so organised, they hadn't checked the programme, but they had managed to get seats right at the front. Imagine their horror and the delight of their charges when the first act was 16 scantily clad, high-kicking young ladies. They were scantily clad to start with, but very quickly the scanty was removed. Reg Addy and Francis Bareham sank lower and lower in their seats in embarrassment. And suddenly Reg Addy had a tap on the shoulder. "Sir, sir." "Yes, boy, what is it?" He said, "It's Alan Ross, sir, Alan Ross." "Well, what's the matter with him?" "Well, sir, his father said if he ever watched naked women on a stage, he'd turn to stone, and he thinks it started."
Co-chairman, I am going to stick to my original brief. The invitation that you extended to me in December of 2007, and then you spring it on me this evening, coming around saying we want 3 minutes from you, and get on with it and get off, and let's get on with the real speeches. This is what I prepared, Mr. Chairman, irrespective of your wishes. Attitudes to discipline changed in my time. Am I still within my slot? In the very early days, I remember a young lad tripping along the corridor there, and I said, "Boy?" I said, "What is your name?" He said, "Norman." I said, "Norman what?" He said, "Norman Pearson." I said, "Norman Pearson what?" He said, "I haven't got another name." I said, "When I speak to you, your name is Norman Pearson, sir." A few days later, same lad tripping down the same corridor. "Boy, where are you going?" He said, "Norman Pearson, sir." On another occasion, it was reported to me that someone was smoking in the boys' toilets. So I went to investigate. I could see the cubicle with the blue haze rising above the cubicle door. I banged on the door. I said, "Boy, put that cigarette out, come out and identify yourself." And a deeply resonant bass voice said, "I'm on the toilet. I'm one of the builders." I said, "I do beg your pardon. May I get you an ashtray?"
I first entered the portals of King James's School 48 years and 1 month ago to be greeted in the study by Harry Taylor, to whom I posed the question, "Sir, Mr. Taylor, do you think I should wear a gown?" He said, "Yes, Mr. Bush, otherwise we'll never distinguish you from the pupils." Oh, not quite true, he said, "Oomph," because Harry always did. He preceded any great statement of importance with an oomph. So my career began there with the Taylor, and it ended with the Taylor, because I finished my teaching career at King James's on July the 19th, 1996. And as I walked into school one summer morning to parody one Mr. L. Lee, there to greet me at the old kitchen entrance was Jack Taylor, to take my hand in his bear-like paw and wish me a happy final day. Of all the memories of that day, Jack, that's the one I treasure the most. I'm very grateful for it. We shared the whole of our teaching career together at King James's. Jack started teaching before I did, and he finished after I did. Jack, you must be getting on in years.
I'm told that on one occasion I announced to the mixed assembly that girls must not walk more than 2 abreast down St. Helens Gate. Perhaps this was not quite as bad as the notice for which I was not responsible, which appeared in the girls' cloakroom at a previous school stating, "Girls must remove all their clothes at 4 p.m. when the builders are coming in." Throughout my time at the school, I was reminded of the prayer given to me by a friend when I became a head. "O God, give us serenity to accept what cannot be changed, courage to change what should be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference." I offer that same thought to the school today, as I wish it and the old Almaburians every success for the next 400 years.
Thank you to the Joint Chairs for inviting me to speak to this evening. It's a real privilege. There are very few people know in this room this evening that on one summer's morning in 2001, we had a problem with a swarm of bees, which might at first seem as not too much of a problem, but when you reflect on the kind of problem it could be when a number of children have negative reactions to that, it could be quite serious in one's role as a head. Cutting a long story very, very short, a traumatic day was had, during which the comment about a swarm of bees to the Education Authority was, through Chinese whispers, transferred through various departments and organisations within the LA to falling beams. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a number of people in vans turned up with hydraulic jacks saying that this was a historic building, it was a listed building, and they were worried that the big was about to collapse at any moment.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, ex-pupils, teachers and honoured guests. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm especially honoured to be speaking to you on this extra special occasion, one of which I'm sure will be close to the hearts of many old Umburians. We are also here to celebrate the 400th anniversary of our school being granted the Royal Charter by King James in 1608. And looking around the room, I can see from the wistful expressions that many of you can remember that very day. In preparation for my speech, I was looking through the recently published illustrated history of the school, where I was interested to discover that in 1608 the school was empty, derelict and destitute of teaching. On reading these words, I found it strangely reassuring that 400 years later, the school continues to maintain many of these fine traditions.
But one thing that I think is important for the school, and is important for the success of the school and the future success of the school, is the Old Enduring Society. Because you have had a great effect on, well, you will have a great effect on where the school goes in the future, I think. Going back to the early 1970s, you had a great, the things that you did then decided where the school was going to be in the future. Myself and Patrick O'Brien yesterday were looking through all the old papers of the school, and they'll be on display tomorrow when you come and visit. And there's this actual folder there that's full of newspaper cuttings. And it was going on from 1970 to 1974 when the local authority wanted to close down the grammar school. And eventually it was kept open by Margaret Thatcher. But those times the school could very well have closed, or it could have gone to a sixth form college, and as a school it would have disappeared eventually. But because of a concerted effort from the then Old Ormond-Burings, you managed to keep it open as a school. The next time in my memory that you helped out was 4 years ago. We wanted to submit a bid for specialist science college status. But the problem was we had to raise £50,000, and we found that very difficult to do. And it was through the generosity of a lot of people in this room tonight, and the Old Ormond-Burings Society themselves, and the King James's Foundation, that we managed to raise that £50,000. And the rest, you can say, is history. Because what's happened since then, we've got the best examination results ever in the history of school, practically year on, year out. In fact, this year, you probably saw the paper yesterday, that for the first time since the grammar school days, the boys got better GCSE results than the girls did. And in fact, at 78% 5A to C+, the only other school in Kirklees that beat them was Eton White Grammar School, which I think is a fantastic achievement.
I had to correct something that I think it was Mr. Bush said, that I was from Lancashire. Well, it's true, I was born in Lancashire. I was born in Cleveland in Lancashire, just outside Blackpool. But I was only there for a week. My mother had been sent up there by my father because I was born in 1944, and our house got bombed. Even in the womb, I seemed to hear the sounds of bombs, and my father got very upset and insisted that she should take a train from Euston Station, which has had a certain influence in my life, as I'll tell you. And that she should come northwards with me, 8.5 months pregnant, and the money ran out at Blackpool. She went and got a cab, went to the Queen's Hydro in Cleveland, and that's where I was born. I haven't been back there since. I promise you, I've only been back to Lancashire about twice. Is that okay? Can I? Yeah. I'm a southerner, I know you'd much prefer that. Now, somebody, and I think it was you, Mr. Lamb, said that you didn't know what it was that kept people here so much together, this particular school. Well, I know very little about your school. I've known about it for decades. Of course, I've heard about it, even in London. But actually, in wider places than London, because I've met people who are here today. In Brussels, when I was there, very distinguished diplomat then, and also very distinguished diplomat nowadays in Kosovo. So I know very much, a lot about your school. But what it is partly is those lovely buildings of yours. That sense that there's a place that you belong, that you can look at, that you can go back to, that you can revisit, that you can protect, perhaps even spend your own money on and give gifts to. And it's a very important thing. I went to a school which, if I dare to say so, has a 99-year advantage on yours in that it was founded in 1509. But one day in 1966, not very long actually before I was punched by Harold Wilson, and only a matter of a few weeks before I joined the BBC, in fact, they pulled my school down and they rebuilt it in another place. They rebuilt it okay, it's fine. Of course now, a modern building being what it is, it needs to be pulled down yet again and rebuilt, but that's something else. I don't even answer the letters anymore when they suggest that I might like to send them some money for this. But all that's left is an outer wall around outside the playing field, around the playing fields. And I had to go there on my way from my home, which is in Chelsea, to the airport, which is at Heathrow, as we all know, to our cost. And each time I pass it, I must have passed that now thousands of times. Each time, every single time, I think, my school used to be there. I really, really miss it. And then I think about the bastards that pulled it down because they thought that it was too big or too difficult or too noisy. So please don't do it. Don't let them do it. It's worth everything you can do to people, because that's one of the things that keeps you together.
The following morning, the traditional procession up St Helens preceded a moving Founders' Day service in Almonbury Parish Church.
Distinguished educationists of modern Britain, Sir Michael Sadler. In his report he wrote, "Technical skill must rest upon a basis of liberal training. Education is never to be utilitarian, not a case of building learning factories. Instead, it is to be pursued in view of the special life, as he writes, that has to be lived with the express purpose of forming a person fit to live it." Those are noble words, and that, it seems to me, is what we celebrate here on this historic day. That is what King James Almonbury is about.
Two days later, the Duke of Gloucester honoured the school with a visit to unveil a plaque to mark the 400th anniversary of Kirklees' most historic school.
Back in 1547. And they were called K? Yes, it's on the maternal side. All right. And were they industrialists here, or? They were yeoman farmers who did well at the district monasteries. Oh, right. Very good. And Christopher Mann. Good morning, sir. You represent the old boys. Some of them. And they're all boys or some girls? No, girls at the school, yes. The master will tell you. Oh, right.
And Mr. Mann has done a lot to put this event together.
Do you have time then to arrange?
Well, I have nothing else to do.
Judge Graham,
Morning.
Cliff,
Hello.
Elquoy and Chairman of the Trustees of the King James Foundation, which means
Correct.
what?
I look after the school's trust monies. Oh, right. And this building here. But it was a day school, presumably then? Yes. Or did the headmaster or a master live here?
Patrick O'Brien, who's the deputy teacher, who's been in charge of all this.
And how do you get to be head boy? You're like the apprentice, is it?
Yes.
No, they're the not his face.
He was very confident with his ands, wasn't he? With his big ands. He would have thought that was an unnecessary
The
word
least
to
important
emphasise.
word, isn't it? What is that there up in the top line? Well,
Where's the flap?
you have to write, but understand.
Furthermore. Yeah, nicely, doesn't it? It's too
You're a Latin scholar.
A made-up person that has actually sent them the
This is Richard Taylor. This is Roger Dowling from the Society who runs our website and he's produced a beautiful
Your Majesty. Then it seems that a charter can be granted on these terms. Sir Thomas, please read to my noble lords the charter to be granted to the inhabitants of Almonbury.
At the humble suit of the tenants and inhabitants.
I thank you all for this token of loyalty and goodwill. And now, my lords, at the request of some of your esteemed townsmen, I am pleased to grant this school with a charter. Henceforth, it shall be known as the Free Grammar School of King James in Almonbury. Let the charter be read.
Charter granted to the inhabitants of the Royal Manor of Almonbury in Yorkshire, at the humble suit of the tenants and inhabitants of Almonbury, I, James, King of England, France, Ireland and Scotland, grant to them the right to establish a free grammar school for the bringing up of children and youth in grammar and all good learning, to consist of one master, one usher, and governed by 6 honest men of the most wise and discreet religious persons within the said parish, or dwelling within 2 miles thereof, who shall be called governors of the goods, possessions, and revenues of the Free Grammar School of King James in Almonbury, given at Westminster, the 24th...
400 years and 1 day since the school was awarded the Royal Charter from King James I. I would like to invite Your Royal Highness to unveil the commemorative plaque and say a few words.
Master, it's a very great pleasure to me to come and join you on this day of celebration to mark your 400th anniversary of the Charter. I'm very conscious that your picture of James I makes him look rather miserable. And I think at the time, in 1608, he wasn't at all miserable because although he'd been King of Scotland for about 40 years, the prospect of being King of England was something that he much looked forward to because England was considerably richer than Scotland, and it gave hope that they are conscious in some way of the success of the school that they founded, they gave a charter to. And I wish the very best of luck to all of you in fulfilling their ambitions in the next century or so. So with that thought, it's a great pleasure to unveil this plaque. Congratulations.
On behalf of all those associated with the school, we'd like to thank you for attending on this momentous occasion. And as a token of our appreciation, we'd now like to present you with some small gifts.
The final special event to mark the anniversary was a reunion disco party at the school, attended by nearly 500 former students and members of staff. Today, the school has 850 pupils and is one of the most oversubscribed schools in the borough. So what does the future hold?
We're all very happy at the moment about the way the school's moving forward. We've got our best examination results that we've had for years. We're very, very confident that future years will continue the fantastic climb in the results that we're achieving. The school is extremely popular. We're oversubscribed all the time. Every week we're getting people phoning up seeing if they can get the children in the school. So it's wonderful times at the moment at King James's School. We've also got to look forward to is a remodelling of the school or rebuilding certain parts of the school to replace some of our dilapidated buildings and put 21st century buildings up there. And I think that once we retain the best of the old and have these new buildings, and with the present popularity of the school, the success of King James is going to be guaranteed for future generations. And hopefully that we'll be in a situation where future head teachers will be interviewed in 50, 100, 150 years time, and they'll be saying something exactly the same as this, that King James is one of the most successful schools, if not the most successful schools in Kirklees and the West Yorkshire region.